What's up, guys? This is James from the Timur podcast, and I've got a video today showcasing another faction for the mod Fall of Constantinople 1448 Tsardoms. I said that backwards, but I think you know what I mean. And that is a mod that was created for the video game Medieval 2 Total War. I've been playing Medieval 2 since it came out about 2,000 years ago, and I have played probably 30 or 40 mods for the game, and this is by far my favorite mod. And as such, I just wanted to bring as much attention to it as possible. I'm not a modder. I've had no... I haven't helped the team at all with this mod. That is all credit to them, but I love it, and I just want to talk about it as much as possible. So, today I want to look at the Emirate of Karaman, which is one of the few Islamic factions. So there are 4 Islamic factions in this game. You have the Ottomans, you have the... where are we? The Beylik of Kandar, which I believe is pronounced Beylik of Jandar. One of my viewers pointed that out. C's are pronounced as J's in Turkish, so thank you very much for pointing that out. You have the Crimean Khanate, which is also Muslim at this point, with a lot of the Mongols and Golden Horde leaders converting to Islam about 100 years ago or so at this point. And then, of course, you have the Emirate of Karaman. So, quite an interesting faction. I have a lot to say about them, but let's just dive into this. So, it is 1448. Of course, you begin with 4 settlements, which is interesting. You are Islamic, you have no allies, and you are at war with Rhodes, which is the Knights Hospitallers down here in southwestern Anatolia. So that kind of makes sense. There is a long history of, obviously, the Knights of St. John fighting against different Muslim powers, and you are at war with them, although they're not really your neighbors, but that's about it. For historical background, I will kind of scroll through this in case you want to pause and read it. But basically, the Emirate of Karaman is actually really interesting because they emerged after the Seljuk Empire kind of fell apart. And they were situated in the middle of a lot of rising powers. You had, obviously, the Byzantines and later the Ottomans to the west. You had the Mongols and the ensuing Ilkhanate all throughout the Middle East and eastern and northern Anatolia. And then you also had the Mamluks, the Egyptian dynasty that was not in this map, but all throughout the Levant and, of course, Egypt, which would be somewhere down here if the map continued. And then there were also various Catholic and Crusader factions. We talked about the Hospitallers. You had Cyprus, which was kind of the last Crusader stronghold, as the Crusaders had been pushed out of Outremer, or the Levant, but they still controlled Cyprus. And then you also had the Armenian kingdom of Cilicia down here in southeastern Anatolia. The Armenians were largely pushed out of their homelands in what we would call modern-day Armenia today. But a few Armenian lords set up kind of a base of operations, which later grew into a kingdom down in Cilicia. So that's kind of interesting. Anyway, back to Karaman. The Karamanids were able to kind of take a lot of power by warring against their various neighbors, and it kind of went good and bad sort of equally. Sometimes the Karamanids did really well, and sometimes they did not. But they always kind of managed to keep their identity. They did have to accept the rule of other neighbors at certain times, whether it be the Mamluks or the Mongols or Amir Timur with the Timurids who came through around 1400 or so. I know a little bit about that because of my podcast, but we're not there on the podcast yet. But more recently, after Timur came through and defeated the Ottomans at the Battle of Ankara, the Ottoman Empire did not collapse, but it went through a crisis for quite a while, where you had different Ottoman players and claimants all trying to take power. This was in the early 1400s. And during that time, the Karamanids were able to expand their power, expand their reach, kind of in this power vacuum that the Ottomans left behind. More recently, the Emirate of Karaman went to war with the Ottomans a few different times and even allied with the Hungarians just a few years prior to where we are to try and create sort of a sandwich against the Ottomans. But this all fell apart in 1444 when the Ottomans destroyed one of the last crusade movements at the Battle of Varna. So now, in 1448, you have an uneasy peace with the Ottomans. You share a religion, your culture is somewhat similar in a way. Both of you claim to be the true heirs of the Seljuk Empire, but there's also a history of you fighting them on multiple occasions. So they do remember that, and you're gonna have to deal with the Ottoman. That's the big question of this mod, is how are you gonna deal with the Ottomans? And with the Emirate of Karaman, you're gonna have to answer that question basically on turn 1. Anyway, enough history. I'm sorry, I love Middle Eastern history, so I can speak about it for far too long, but let's take a look at this. For the winning conditions, you need to hold 50 regions, including all of these, which are a lot of Anatolian regions. And 50 regions is actually quite a bit for only starting with 4. So if we look at, for example, Austria needs to control 60 regions to win, but they start with 9, so they're already almost a sixth of the way there. You have, where are we? There we are. You have to take 46 regions in order to meet that 50, so it's a pretty steep climb. That is pretty large. For other factions that have more settlements, they still need less. Bosnia has 5 settlements, and they only need 35 to win. So it is quite a steep hike to win as the Emirate of Karaman, and you are surrounded by the Ottomans pretty much, so there's not too many ways of expansion. However, you do have some tricks up your sleeve, which we'll get into. Anyway, for strengths, good medium infantry and cavalry, absolutely. Capable archers, yes, very true. And can train powerful Ghulam units, absolutely true. You have a fantastic roster. I'll get into it obviously later, but you have a phenomenal roster. Weaknesses, lack of polearm infantry, yeah, you pretty much don't have any. And a dangerous position, very true. I mean, you are in the Ottomans' backyard, and they're going to want to take Anatolia for themselves fairly soon, so you'll have to decide how to deal with that. But I think that's enough. Let's jump into the campaign map to see what the starting position is. So here we are on the campaign map, and as always, you are given a nice welcome with some historical background, which kind of gives you a little bit of history and mentions some of your neighbors and how to possibly deal with them, as well as saying that you are the rightful heirs of the Seljuks, and Anatolia belongs to you. So we'll see what we can do with that. So, looking first, your capital is the city of Konya, which is a very important city in the region, and this has been your capital for a few years by now, I believe, and the Karamanids were able to take it relatively recently. I'd have to check the dates on that, but it's a very important city, and it does belong to you. So you're making a good amount of money from it. 2,500 is certainly not terrible. Inside, we see that it's as large of a city as it can be, so there's no growth potential really. So you know what that means, throw up those taxes, and you're making 3,200 now, so that's not bad at all. Inside, we actually have a really nice force. We've got our faction leader, Sultan Amir Ibrahim II, or I should just say Amir Ibrahim. We've got some good horse archers, which is nice. We've got some fantastic infantry, and a lot of it. We've got some great archers, we've got the Nafatun, and we've got some pretty good medium cavalry as well. So that's a really nice army that you start off with your capital. Maybe just throw a few more units in there, and you are ready to conquer from turn 1. As far as your faction leader goes, he's fairly good. He is a little old, but he does have some nice traits and whatnot, including an apothecary, which is a nice retinue. It gives you extra hit points. So if you're going to keep Ibrahim here as a governor, I would transfer this over to your whatever general you're going to have fighting your battles, because those extra hit points are very nice. There's nothing more annoying than losing one of your favorite generals in this game. That's a huge pet peeve of mine. Oh, excuse me. Just choked on some water. As far as recruitment goes, you have some early spearmen, some early archers, and some basic cavalry, including some good horse archers. So not terrible. You might need to build it up a little bit, get that army barracks, but you definitely can pump out some units pretty quickly here. As far as unique buildings, we have the Mausoleum of Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rumi, and this is, well, I'll just scroll through in case you want to read it, but pretty cool historical landmark here. Gives you religion conversion bonus, which is nice. You are mostly Muslim, yeah, 82%, but that is nice nonetheless. Public health bonus, 15%, that's awesome, and increase in tradable goods. So that's a nice little bonus to have. As far as, well, we'll just cover the settlements first. Up here to the west, we have a small town. It's not huge, got 5,000 people or so. It's going to need to build up quite a bit more before it can expand, but inside, we don't have too much. We can get some decent archers. I actually love these Turkmen bowmen. They're actually quite good, but nothing too spectacular. Inside, we have some basic Turkmen axemen who are not the best unit, and we also have a governor who has no loyalty to us at all, so we'd have to watch out for that. He does have some nice command, though, so he could be good just to kind of hold the line here if the Ottomans do tend to attack, which they do tend to do. That was a terrible sentence, but we'll make it through. Moving down, we've got a few forts scattered around here and over here. The way forts work in this mod is they represent smaller, less important settlements, and there is a hard-coded limit of how many settlements you can have. I believe it's 200. So this is just a nice way to make the map feel more populated, and you do get a unit of free upkeep inside the fort, so that's a nice way to save costs. And if you've downloaded the most recent file for this game, it's actually been changed to 2 units, which is nice. I have not done that yet. I will, but I have a few saved games which I want to talk about before I transfer to the new version of this mod. Anyway, down here we have the Fortress of Karaman, which is what gives you your name as a faction. It's no longer your capital, though. That was moved to Konya, but this is going to be one of your early game recruitment centers. Inside we have your faction heir, the Crown Prince Ishak, and inside we've got a decent army. Nothing too spectacular, a lot of early tier units, but we've got some spearmen, some swordsmen, and some bowmen, so nice little army there. We could definitely combine that with the garrison in Konya, and that would give us a nice full stack army on turn 1, which is pretty cool. He's a pretty good general. He's definitely got some potential, and historically he was pretty important too, so that's neat. There's a lot of recruitment options here, including just sort of your basic early units, but a lot of them are actually pretty good for early tier units. And then this is also where you recruit your princess from, as well as 2 of your unique units, the Senior Kula Guards and the Senior Kula Lancers, which are 2 very good units, which we'll talk about later, but you recruit them from here. As far as unique buildings, we have the Emir's Court, which gives you public order bonus due to law, awesome. Health bonus, awesome. And then, like I said, this is where you get your special recruitment units from, and then there's a little bit of historical background, which is cool. It's probably a Byzantine fort originally, and then passed into different Turkish hands, which is cool. Down here we got another fort for garrison purposes, and then our final settlement is over here. It's not as populous as Karaman, but it can definitely grow. And we have a general in here who's pretty good, has some potential for sure. Nothing too spectacular with the units that are available to you, although I do love these Turkmen bowmen, which I've said a few times now, and you can obviously build up, which gives you more units. That's about that. Talked about the forts. Otherwise, we got a few generals lying around. Over here, we've got a guy who is not too loyal, but he does have decent command, and he can also move really far if you just look at his movement anywhere in the green. And I believe that comes from... Yes, he's a Turkoman, which is cool. So movement points plus 20. So every character in this game has a different cultural kind of background, and this will give you different bonuses. And since this man is a Turkoman, he is used to the nomadic lifestyle in a way, probably, and this gives him extra bonus points, which is very cool. Over here, we have another general. He's a little more loyal and a little better as a commander, which is great. He's also a Turkoman, so this gives him that extra movement bonus, which is awesome. And then we have a man over here who is also pretty loyal, good command, and he's a Turkoman as well, so he gets that movement bonus, which is awesome. We start with a Imam, which is great. Now, as a Muslim faction, you do have access to the jihad mechanic. And in vanilla Total War, Medieval 2 Total War, in the original game, an Imam only needed 4 piety points to call a jihad, but in this mod it is up to 5, which can take a little while to get there. So I would recommend moving him somewhere with the least amount of Muslims living in it, just so he can upgrade his piety as quickly as possible. So he could be here in Konya, that's not bad, but I would guess that Cyprus is actually less Islamic, so that might be a good place to put him for now, so he can grow in his faith. Because the jihad mechanic is super powerful, and you're gonna want it playing as any Muslim faction. You got a diplomat here, which is good. You do not have access to merchants, unfortunately, but that's just part of the game. And then you got one more general down here, and he is not too loyal, but is decent in command, which is good. So that is your starting position. Oh wait, did we look at the units you have? We looked at them. Down here, yeah, you've got some archers, and you've also got some javelin men, which is kind of cool. So that is your starting position. You are over here on the very edge of the map, so there's no expanding eastwards, which is unfortunate, but that's the limit for the map, which is understandable for this mod. So let's throw off the fog of war and take a look at your neighbors. But before we do that, let's talk about the economy. Karaman definitely has the potential to have a great economy. I mean, we can see that Konya is already making 3,200, which is good. And there are a lot of really wealthy cities throughout Anatolia. Bursa is a very rich city up here. Sinope is a very rich city, potentially, so you could definitely expand northwards. A lot of the islands in the Aegean Sea are rich, so once you expand a little bit and kind of build up your infrastructure, you can have a pretty good economy. Starting wise, you have 7,000 gold, which is not terrible, and you're making money, but not too much, so we'll have to take a look at that. As far as diplomacy, like we said, you have no allies and you are at war with the Knights of St. John. But they're actually not on the worst terms with you. It's probably been a little while since you've been fighting. I forgot to look at how you fare with other factions. It looks like you're pretty reasonable with all of them. The Albanians hate you for some reason, and I would guess that the Ottomans hate you. Yes, the Ottomans' relations are abysmal. Just a few years prior, we actually sacked Bursa, so they definitely remember that. And we were allied with the Hungarians, which are one of their bitter rivals. So, yeah, the Ottomans are not too fond of us, so we'll have to decide how to deal with that. The Beylik of Jandar is okay with us. They don't like us too much. I mean, we probably have a history with competing with them. The Crimean Khanate is okay with us, which could be good. They're also Islamic, so that could be a potential ally. But that's pretty much it. Everyone else, it looks like you're reasonable. Genoese aren't too sure of you yet, but who are the Genoese ever sure of, you know? That's about that for that. What a terrible sentence. It's been a long day at work yet again, so we're going to struggle through this. As far as your neighbors go, you only really have one, and that's the Ottomans, and they are all around you. To the west, there are some cities of theirs that aren't too well defended. So down here in Adalia, you've got, 7 units. Up here in Burdur, couple units, nothing too special. And a lot of these are just militia units. So you could expand pretty quickly through here. But just be careful when you do that, because the Ottomans will retaliate eventually. Usually sooner than later, and they will usually do so with full stack armies. Your enemies, the Hospitallers, are over here, but they won't be too much of an issue, at least right away. If you do expand westwards, a lot of times the Hospitallers will try to attack you, so just be mindful of that. Be ready to fight the Knights of St. John and the Ottomans if you decide to go that route. That can be a bit of a fight because, I mean, these are two very powerful factions with fantastic units, so just be prepared for that. Directly to your north, the Ottomans actually have quite a few armies. So right next door, they have a full stack army in this castle with pretty good units. And then up here, we also have another full stack army. If we move this gentleman up here, we can actually see what they have. A lot of early tier units, but even early tier Ottoman units are scary. And they have those horse archers, they have Sipahis, which are always a pain. They've got some heavy infantry and some halberdiers. So that could definitely be a lot to handle in the early game. And then up here in Angora, they also have quite a few units as well, too. Now, one thing I have noticed about this mod, it doesn't actually show up here. There's an Ottoman army in here, I believe, or maybe it spawns later on in this general region. But he can't actually move out beyond these mountains. I'll see if I can see this. You can see that I can move this character anywhere in the green, but I can't move him anywhere in here, and it's because this mountain range doesn't have any movement paths. So in every game that you'll play, you'll see this full stack Ottoman army just kind of floating around in this region, but he'll never attack you, he'll never move out. I mean, that's as far as I know. Maybe that's kind of like a placeholder. I know certain mods just have inaccessible areas that have armies in them that are later moved with different scripts. I know Broken Crescent does that, as well as some of the Lord of the Rings mods. So maybe that's the case, but I don't know. But either way, if you expand northwards and you see a full stack Ottoman army up here, it could look scary, but never fear, he will not attack you. And then all the way to the north, we have a Genoese colony up here. There's nothing too much, or not too many units here, but they do tend to recruit quite a bit, so that could be a tough castle to take. And then we have the Jandarids up here too, who they're going to be busy fighting the Ottomans for a while, and that could be a good expansion opportunity for you, is you could just kind of march through Ottoman land, either taking Angora or maybe allying with the Ottomans, and then take the Jandarid lands from them, because you do have a better military, and they're going to be pretty spent after fighting off a few Ottoman invasions early on, so that could be a good expansion option. And then to the south, you also have one rebel settlement next to you, and that is the Kingdom of Cyprus, which, like I said earlier, is kind of the last vestige of the Crusader states out here in Outremer, and it is rebel-controlled, but they do have quite a few good Crusader and French Western-stylized units in here, so do be ready for a fight, but that is the only army here, other than the small Genoese garrison here in this fortress. But could be a good expansion opportunity. You wouldn't make anybody mad by doing that. Maybe the Hospitallers, but they'll just have to deal with that. So that's kind of your neighbors as far as that goes, but obviously the big question is, what are you going to do with the Ottomans? Because they do hate you, and you do have a history of warfare with them, but you don't start at war with them, so you could definitely appease them. You have a diplomat that's 2 turns away from one of their settlements, so by turn 2, you could be allied with the Ottomans, and they will accept your alliance proposition. I would probably... yeah, I'm pretty confident that they will. The Ottomans usually accept any diplomacy because they're so desperate for it. That's just how the AI works. So that is definitely an option, and unlike a lot of other mods from Medieval 2, in this mod, your allies do typically stay loyal to you, at least for a while. Maybe they'll attack you later if you're really bothering them, but that would give you the stability and safety that you might want in the early game. Just ally with the Ottomans, avoid their wrath, and build up for a while before you can maybe take them on later. Otherwise, if you decide to take on the Ottomans, which is kind of historical, I would say the Kandarids or Jandarids are an obvious ally. Oh, my laundry's done. They're an obvious ally because they are obviously in a war of survival against the Ottomans, and they will gladly take any help that they can get. What would be really nice is if you could get other Catholic nations allied to you to fight against the Ottoman menace, because everybody's worried about them. The Greeks would probably like an alliance with you. Maybe some of the Italian colonies would be allies with you, but that's the big question. There's two ways you can do this campaign. Ally with the Ottomans first, and then maybe backstab them later, or just fight them right away. And if you fight them right away, be ready for a fight. Now, from my experience, it is a little easier to fight the Ottomans in Anatolia rather than in Europe. But either way, it's going to be really tough. So just be ready for a long and strenuous war that will drain your economy and kill many of your men. So just be ready for that. Other than that, I think that's pretty much it. We can see, yeah, the regions you need is pretty much all of Central Anatolia, which kind of makes sense. Let's see, money, expansion, diplomacy. We talked about all that. I think that's pretty much it. I don't have too much more to say. This is one faction that I didn't really pay any mind to. I didn't think that I would enjoy playing as them, but they turned out to be an absolute blast. I would definitely give them a try, but I'll probably talk more about that later when I show you my campaign. But with that, let's get into the roster of the Karamanids, which is an awesome roster. It's probably one of my favorites for this mod. So here we are on the battle map looking at the roster for the Emirate of Karaman, and I gotta say, the roster is pretty good. It's definitely a fun army to play with. I did not go into Karaman with too high of hopes. I was kind of assuming this would be a cut and dry, like standard medieval Islamic faction like I've seen in a lot of other mods. I don't know why I thought that, because obviously the modders went above and beyond with this faction, and it has some really great flavor. So let's just get into this and begin with the Yaya Spearmen, which is your basic spear militia unit, and it's pretty much everything you would expect. Attack of 1, charge bonus of 2, total offense of 7, no armor, but they do get a little bit of a buff from a shield. They are dirt cheap, they get free upkeep, they have bad morale, pretty bad stamina. Their job is to garrison settlements and to absorb missiles and cavalry charges, and pretty much nothing more than that. You do get 152 of them, but all of these are pretty standard for spear militia units, so I'm not going to spend much time on them. But they do have a great unit design, and that's very true for most of these units, is they look fantastic. So that's about it for them. They're very easy to recruit. You can recruit them in great numbers, so if you need cheap spears, not a terrible option, but you have got some much better spear options, which we'll get into. Next, we have the Turkmen Axemen, and this is actually a mercenary unit all throughout Anatolia, available to any faction, but I wanted to showcase them here because I know you start with some of them when you play as Karaman, and this is not a great unit, but they can get a few kills because they do fight with axes. So because they have axes, they get that effective against armor bonus, which is very nice. And an attack of 2 with a charge of 1, that's all pretty terrible, but if you get some veterancy on them, that might bump up a little bit, and then, yeah, you might be able to get a few kills on more heavily armored units, but other than that, they're not going to perform too well. But the great thing about these guys is they are extremely cheap. I think it's like 150 to recruit them, and then something like 82 for their upkeep. So basically nothing. And yeah, they don't have great morale, but they actually do have good stamina because these are men who are living on the harsh terrains of difficult parts of Anatolia, so they're used to that hard lifestyle, and for the price, to throw them in as kind of a reserves, or a reserve behind your main battle line, they're not the worst option, but just don't expect them to, you know, go against knights or janissaries or something like that. But they do get free upkeep as Karaman, which is nice, so you can throw them in some settlements. That might actually be true for other factions too, because I know the Hospitallers can have them. Either way, they're really cheap, so if you don't get free upkeep, you don't have to worry about it too much. Next up, we got another unit, which is pretty cool, and that is the Kurdish Javelin Men. So neat to see the Kurds represented in this mod, but this is actually a pretty good early tier Javelin unit. They have that good stamina, which is nice. Melee attack of 2 is fine. Again, that's not why you get these guys. You get these guys for their missile attack of 11, because Javelins are devastating, and they have several of them. So that's pretty nice. There's also 150 of them in a unit, so you can have 150 Javelins flying towards the enemy a couple times, which is great. Their total defense is a little low. They don't have any armor, so if they're taking missile fire, they're gonna fall pretty quickly. They do have a shield with a 3, which is not bad, but other than that, you're gonna want to place these guys in a protected area from where they can throw their missiles. They're pretty easy to recruit. I want to say, yeah, you can only recruit them in certain areas, but in those areas, you can recruit them pretty fast, so that's nice. And in the early game for that 11 attack, that's very valuable. They do get free upkeep in these regions, which is nice, but I want to say they're pretty cheap anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Then we have a few more militia units to talk about, and up first are the Yaya archers, so they kind of pair well with your spearmen here, and they're just a very basic militia archer unit. I would say they're maybe slightly better than other militia archers that other factions have. They do have a little bit of defense with a 7. Melee attack of 2 is actually a little higher. Usually it's a 1. But the missile attack of 2 is pretty standard. And these are peasant militia who, in a lot of cases, are being forced to fight, so that poor morale does reflect that. But they're very cheap, they get that free upkeep, and they have a little higher defense. So that is nice. It kind of reflects how common the bow was in these regions of the world, but not a terrible unit if you need a few more missiles in the air. But other than that, you have so many more bowmen and archers who are just better choices. And the first one being one of your unique units, I believe, the Fitian Braves. And I'm actually a big fan of these guys because they are militia archers who actually do really well. First of all, they have a missile attack of 4, which is high for militia standard archers, and it's long-range missiles, which is great, because usually any type of low-tier archers, they don't have that long-range capability, but these guys actually do, which is awesome. And a melee attack of 4 is actually nothing to scoff at either. That's pretty high for this level of unit, so that's good. And a total defense of 14 on top of that is also very good. They've got decent armor, decent shields, so all in all, just a great unit. They're very easy to train. You can get them pretty much right off the bat. You can get them all over the map, and because of these stats, they're not bad at all. I typically use these guys as my militia, but I'll have them even on the front lines in certain places, because for the price and for their availability, that's not bad at all. So, big fan of these guys, and you do have better archers, but archers are powerful if you have them in great numbers, so don't feel bad about bringing these guys into combat. Next up, we have another one of my favorite units in this mod, and that is the Turkmen Bowmen. I think I've talked about these guys before with other factions, but I wanted to talk about them again here. And they are an area of recruitment unit, so they're only really available in Anatolia, but they are fantastic. And you can get them as pretty much any faction, I believe, including Christian factions, which is cool. But they're just a great bow unit. Good morale, good stamina, that's great. That's also pretty rare for early bow units. They can use flaming missiles, which is nice. Long-range missiles, that's awesome. Combat bonus in woods, just as another little bonus. Missile attack of 5 is great. That's it's actually pretty standard for archers, but for early tier archers, 5 is awesome. Total defense of 12 is okay. A lot of that is defense skill, so they will take missile fire pretty poorly, but there's 150 of them in a unit. They're fairly cheap. I want to say their upkeep, it's something weird, like 189 or something like that, 191 something. Not terrible, maybe a little expensive in the early game, but definitely not terrible. And they get free upkeep, which is great too. So I'm a big fan of these guys. I will pick them up pretty much as any faction if I'm in Anatolia, just because they do give you that long-range missile of 5, which is great. And bows and crossbows are very powerful weapons in Medieval 2, and both come with their pros and cons. I personally prefer bows because I like their rate of fire. These guys can fire a lot quicker than crossbows, but I also really love crossbows too. So it's always a debate amongst the different servers and discords and whatnot, whether people prefer bows or crossbows, and they're both really good, but I do like bows, and because of that, I like Karaman because they are a very bow-heavy nation. Or not nation, that's a more modern concept, but faction, we'll go with faction. Next up, here's another unit I've talked about before, and that is the Nokia Archers. These guys are also area of recruitment units, so they're available in Anatolia and Tatar regions. They're also available in certain European regions, so that's not entirely accurate, but you can train these guys throughout parts of Thrace and Bulgaria, I've found. There might be more regions other than that, but just keep in mind that once you expand westwards into more European areas, you might not be able to train these guys, but it is more lenient than it says here. And this is just another great bow unit. I love these guys. I really love their design. You can definitely see a lot of the, I don't know what you would call this style of armor. It's at the tip of my tongue. Anyway, they look great. They've got these awesome shields on their back, which all have unique designs, and they're just a solid archer unit. Good morale, good stamina, long-range missiles. They can use flaming missiles. Melee attack of 4 is nice. I believe it's armor piercing. I want to say it's a mace. But even if it's not, a 4 is not terrible for archers. Missile attack of 5 is good. Again, it's not great, but it's definitely it'll get the job done usually. And a total defense of 17 is really nice. 10 of that being armor is crazy. So they can definitely take hits. You can throw them in the melee if you need them to. Recruitment cost of 600 is not too bad, and I want to say their upkeep is pretty reasonable too. So yeah, just a great archer unit so far. I would have no problems bringing an army to the field with tons of Turkmen bowmen and Nokia archers. Like, that is a killing machine right there. If you throw them behind some spearmen in the early game, you're going to do really well. You do have access to a crossbow unit, and I know I talked about these guys when talking about the Jandarids, but it's a good unit. You don't... Again, a lot of Islamic factions didn't really adopt the crossbow as much as their European counterparts, but it is nice that you do have access to one of them, and they're definitely not the best crossbow unit in the game, but they can get the job done. Long-range missiles is great to see. Good stamina is also nice. Missile attack of 9 is, I would say, a little higher than average for early tier crossbows. Usually, militia crossbow units will have like an 8. Melee attack of 2 is terrible, but that's not why you get these guys. And total defense of 9 is also a little low, so they will take hits, but they're cheap. They're fairly easy to recruit, although, actually, I take that back for Karaman. Actually, I can't remember. I can't remember how easy these guys are to recruit, because I would usually go archer heavy. But I know playing as the Jandarids, they're pretty easy to recruit. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to stick with that, but we shall see. But yeah, pretty interesting unit, and if you like your crossbows, not a bad unit to pick up, but you might want to rely more on Genoese mercenaries and things like that. Then we get to your best archer unit, and that is the Junior Cool Archers. These guys are fantastic. They're definitely in the top level of archers. I would say there are better archers in the mod, but these guys are definitely contenders for the top few spaces. And yeah, they're just fantastic. Good morale, good stamina, long-range missiles. They can use sharpened stakes. Melee attack of 2 is really low, but it is armor piercing, so they get that bonus. Missile attack of 6 is good. I would actually say it's very good. It doesn't get too much higher with archers. And total defense of 17 is good too, especially since 11 of that is armor. So this is a great unit. You never have to feel bad about bringing these guys to the battlefield. They can lay down those sharpened stakes, which is nice. But they do come with a few drawbacks, and I wrote it down here. First of all, they take 4 turns to recruit, which is a lot. So you have to first build up all of your archery ranges and whatnot, which can take time and money, and then you have to wait even longer to actually train them. So that is a bit of a pain, but they're worth it. They're worth the wait. And then the other thing about them is they're a little on the pricier end. Their upkeep is 315, so It's not terrible. There definitely are more expensive archer units, but 315 still is a lot, so you do have to watch out for that. And then I would like a slightly higher melee attack. I'm a little disappointed with that too. But it's not the worst, and they are a great archer unit. You won't have many of them in your army just because they are hard to get a hold of, but if you use a few of these guys for their stakes and then also have, you know, your Nokia archers and your Turkmen, you'll do just fine with archer power. You just have so many options available to you that you'll have no problem getting enough bows in the field. So great unit, big fan of them, but you will have to rely on a few more as well. You also get access to the Nafatoon, and I've talked about the Nafatoon before. I love them. They're a fantastic unit. They throw these fiery napalm-like bombs, basically pots full of, I think it's just called Nafatoon, or naphtha. Naphtha is what it's called, which is a fiery chemical, sort of like Greek fire, but it burns upon impact. And historically, the only things that could really put it out were dousing it with sand or vinegar, supposedly. There are other accounts that say water did work, but some accounts say that water only spread it. So it is either way, it's a very deadly chemical composition, and they throw these. They don't have the greatest range because they are just chucking these pots, but once the pots hit the target, they will just decimate them regardless of armor or shields or skill of the impacted. So missile attack of 15, that's a lot, but it doesn't really reflect it. I would say it's actually much higher just on the damage it does deal. Melee attack of 4 is okay. I mean, again, you don't want to get these guys in the melee. You want them throwing their bombs. Frighten nearby enemy is very powerful because if I had to go up against them, I would be frightened too. They are a little expensive. Recruitment costs 800. I want to say their upkeep is a little expensive as well. I didn't write it down, unfortunately. And unfortunately with the Nafatoon, unlike their European counterparts, their defense is lacking. 8 is not great, and only 2 armor. So be careful with these guys. I've found that if you bring them to the battlefield, the AI will tend to target them with crossbows, archers, and whatnot, and you will take casualties very quickly. So the best thing to do is to keep them behind your heavily armored spearmen or whatnot, or in siege battles if you're defending. These guys will be absolute monsters. But either way, always train them when you can, just because they can single-handedly turn the fate of a battle, and they're experts at killing generals. This mod is it can be pretty difficult to kill generals because a lot of times those are the most armored units in the game. So any unit that can just kill a general in a few seconds is very valuable, and that coupled with their ability to instill fear it can start mass routes pretty easily. So great unit, love these guys. But let's keep this thing going. You do have access to an early gun unit. It says average. That's hard to gauge. All gun units are valuable, even if they're the worst. And these guys do have a few weaknesses, but they're also not the worst. So good morale is nice. Melee attack of 4 is decent. Missile attack of 26 is amazing. Again, any gun unit is good. But this is actually a lot higher than some of the other early tier gun units that might be a 16 or 17 or something like that. So that is quite nice. But similar to the Nafatoon, they only have an armor or a defense skill of 8, and 2 of that is armor. So you can see there's not much protecting these men, and they will take missile fire. But you do have 152 of them, and they're fairly easy to train once you get more populous cities. So I definitely recommend training these guys. They will be pretty much the only gun unit available to you for a while until you get to, if you expand to Italy, maybe. But yeah, they're a great unit. They're not the best. You will struggle later if you're going up against Janissary Musketeers and things like that. But a solid unit, and you can train them pretty quickly in the campaign too. So definitely pick up a couple of these guys. You don't have to feel too bad about it, but there are better guns, just be aware of that. But yeah, now I'm just talking in circles, so let's keep going. You also have access to the Ahi Brotherhood Warriors, and this is actually a really interesting unit. They come from a special building that Islamic factions can build in Anatolia. So it's only in Anatolia, and only Muslim nations, or Muslim factions, there we go, can build the building. But I forgot to show it, so hopefully I'll remember to show you it when we return to the campaign map. But it's a nice little guild building that gives you some nice bonuses, and then it also allows you to train these guys. And when I played as the Jandarids, I didn't really pick these guys up because I saw that they had no armor, and I figured I could find better units elsewhere. That was a mistake. These guys are fantastic. This is a fantastic unit. So let's just get into this. Excellent morale is great. They have a really high morale. They may charge without orders, that's not really a problem. And good stamina is nice too. A lot of other melee infantry don't have good stamina, so these guys will fight a little bit longer there. Attack of 7 is really good for early tier swordsmen, and again, you can get these guys very early in the campaign. A charge of 4 is pretty standard, but it's good, so if they charge in, that's an attack of 11 right there, and that is definitely respectable. Total defense of 12 is not great, and it definitely hurts that they have no armor. So any type of missile fire will decimate these guys because they'll only be able to use their shield against it. In the melee, they'll do a little bit better just because they do have that high defense skill, but just watch out for archers and whatnot. But other than their high attack, the best thing about these guys is they're really easy to recruit, and they're almost free. Recruitment cost of 300, that's like militia tier recruitment costs. I mean, it doesn't really say here, but it's not too far off from 300. That's basically nothing, and then their upkeep is only 123, which is, again, it's basically nothing for what you're getting. So all of that just means pick these guys up. They're a great early campaign, and I would say even mid-campaign if you're fighting weaker factions. They're a great mid-campaign unit, and they also get free upkeep, which is great. The other big drawback is they're only in Anatolian regions, unfortunately, but that's not a huge drawback because you can always, if you're outside of Anatolia, ship more reinforcements over. But a great unit, definitely experiment with these guys. They're a lot of fun to use, and that excellent morale really helps too, especially in the early game. Moving on, we have another unit which I very rarely use because they're just better options, but that is the Arab auxiliaries. These guys are decent. They're just a very average sword unit. You can see that they don't have any abilities. Attack of 5 is average, charge bonus of 3 is average, and even the total defense of 15 is average. They're just kind of as average of swordsmen as you can get. They're only recruitable in Anatolian regions, and I believe only as Muslim factions, but I might be wrong with that, actually. I can't remember who can train these guys, but either way, there's usually better options, and they do have a pro and con with the pricing. The pro is they only take about 300 to recruit, which is very cheap, but their upkeep, the con, is also 300, which is a little pricey, I would say, for infantry. So they're not a bad unit by any means, but there's usually better options to go with. I would always go with the Ahi Brotherhood over the Arabs just because of that price difference. I mean, you could have almost 3 of these units for the same price as 1 of these units, and just because of that, I typically stay away from them, but in a tight spot, if I need just a few more swordsmen who can hold their own for at least a little while, I'll definitely pick these guys up. They're not a bad unit, but there usually are better options. Speaking of better option, now we're getting into your really just great units, and yeah, Karaman has just some, they have a lot of strengths. They have great missile units, they have good militia units, and they have great line infantry. So first we have the Fitian swordsmen, and this is similar to the Arabs. They are basic swordsmen, but they are a little bit better. You can see their stats are pretty much identical, but they do have good morale, which is nice. And they are cheaper as well. Recruitment cost of 540, I mean, well, that's more expensive, but their upkeep is only 154, which is not bad at all. So 154 upkeep for these guys, very, very doable, and I wouldn't rely on them as my main infantry force, especially the longer into the campaign you get, but early game and as a secondary line, these guys are fantastic. There are obviously better swordsmen in the game, but definitely not a bad option. And they're pretty easy to recruit too, so you can easily get a lot of these guys in your armies. And similar to them, we also have the Igdish Spearmen. These guys are also somewhat average in their stats. Total offensive 14, 3 attack, 3 charge bonus. But they have good morale, which is nice. And these two are also pretty easy to pick up in large numbers. There's also 152 of them in a unit, rather than 122, which is nice. And I believe you train the swordsmen from your castles and the spearmen from your cities. So I don't remember if they get free upkeep. I don't think so. But either way, they're not too expensive. And for the early game, they're fantastic. And you can pump out a lot of them. So they look great. They perform pretty well. And you will have better options later on in the game. But even in the late game, they're not a bad unit. Just be careful when going up against better elite units. Speaking of better elite units, you do have a few of them. And the first are the Foot Askari. I love these guys. These are a fantastic spear unit. I can't get enough of their design. I think they're one of the best designed units in the game, especially these guys with their robes and the mail helmets covering their whole face other than their eyes. I just love that. Great design. And these are just fantastic spearmen. Excellent morale, bonus fighting cavalry. They can form the Schiltrum. 4 attack, 4 charge bonus. That's fairly standard for late game spears, but again, that's pretty good, especially against horsemen. And total defense of 18 is very nice. 10 armor is great. Defense skill of 2 is a little lower than I would expect, but I understand that's for balancing purposes. And a shield of 6 is good too. So these guys are fantastic. I use them as basically my front line because they are great at absorbing blows and even dealing a little bit of retribution on their own. 202 of them in a unit is great. They're fairly expensive. Recruitment cost of 1,000, and then their upkeep is 276. So it's not the worst upkeep, but just be mindful that that will get expensive if you have a few of them in your army. And the other big downside of these guys is it takes 3 turns to recruit, which is not horrible. And it is fairly easy to train these guys around your empire once you have the barracks built up. But 3 turns is a little bit of a wait, so you'll have to be mindful of that. But once you get your barracks up in at least a few cities, you can pump these guys out, and they will definitely perform well. So, big fan of these guys, and that's they're probably your best spear unit available to you. There might be some mercenaries, but for the most part, these guys are the best. And then we have got some great infantry, attack infantry, I should say. We have the I'm not gonna try and say that, but assault infantry. They're basically elite swordsmen. These guys are awesome. I would say maybe some of the best swordsmen in the game. I'd really have to check that, but a 9 attack for swordsmen is fantastic. Charge bonus of 4, it doesn't hurt at all. Well, it doesn't hurt my argument for them. It hurts the enemy quite a lot, but both of that is nice. Total offense of 24 is fantastic. You can see they've got this really cool looking armor. They've got these shields, which are cool. Yeah, 24 is great. 13 armor, awesome. 7 defense, great. Good stamina is great. They can fight for a while. Excellent morale. And to top it all off, they inspire nearby troops. So the picture here shows them charging out of a siege tower, and that's exactly right. These guys are the wall takers. They will be excellent flanking forces. They're great on the front line if you can avoid cavalry charges. They're just really fantastic troops in all regards. So definitely pick these guys up when you can. They're a little pricey. Again, it's not horrible, but you will have to just watch your economy a little bit. And I also believe they take 2 or 3 turns to recruit. So do watch out for that. But again, kind of similar to the Foot Askari, once you have a few settlements with your barracks built up, it's not the hardest to get these guys into your armies. So great unit. Big fan of these guys. Never feel bad about training these guys. They will always perform well. And similarly, we have your unique unit, or really one of your two unique units, but that is the Senior Cool Guards. These guys are fantastic. They are the best of the best. Inspires nearby troops. Effective against armor because of these... Are they maces? Oh, they're maces and axes. And excellent morale, good stamina. They're going to fight forever. Attack of 5 is a little low, but it is effective against armor, so you don't really have to worry about it too much. Charge bonus of 3 is fine. Total defense of 23 is fantastic, especially with that that heavy armor. Yeah, these guys are some of the best infantry you have available to you, with the assault infantry too. And these guys they're great. There's really no downside to them, except there are a few downsides to them. I lied to you. Unique unit requires Karaman, Sinop, or Bursa to recruit them, so you can only recruit them in a few cities. There are a few other cities that you can train them in. Athens, I know, is one. And there might be a few other, maybe Constantinople, I can't remember. But there are a few other cities, or maybe it is just Athens, I'd have to look. But either way, it's not the worst. There are other unique units that only are available from one settlement, so it is nice that at least throughout Anatolia you can retrain them pretty easily. But do watch out for that. And the recruitment cost is 1325. For an elite unique unit, that's kind of expected. Their upkeep is... where is it? 371. So again, not the worst, but it can be a little expensive if you're not watching it. And they take 5 turns to train. So you are going to have to wait a while before you can get a few of these units, which is a downside. But again, they're a unique unit. They're not meant to fill up your entire army. They're meant as kind of a special wild card unit. And with the assault infantry and the Ascari, you really don't have to... You won't be missing out too much if you only have 1 or 2 of these units, because you have so many good infantry available to you. And then I wanted to throw in a few mercenary units that are around Karaman. And first we have the Ghazi infantry. These guys are actually available all throughout Anatolia, so they're pretty easy to get a hold of. They are mercenary units, so you can train them basically turn 10 and on fairly regularly. And they're a pretty good mercenary unit. Effective against armor, they have these maces, which are pretty cool. These are the Ghazi infantry, so these are men fighting with religious fervor and very willing to die for the cause. So, good units. It says they're average. Again, their total defense is only 8, so that is pretty low. But the attack of 6 is awesome, especially for mace infantry. And that's even higher than our best effective against armor infantry. So just because of that, it's worth picking these guys up. They're a little pricey for mercenary units. I don't know if I wrote it down. I want to say their upkeep is, I can't remember, but it's a couple hundred, so it is a little pricey if you have a few of these guys, but not the worst. And again, that attack of 6 is excellent. So pick these guys up whenever you can. You can only train them as Muslim factions and in Anatolia, but they're a great supplemental force if you just need another infantry unit that's going to perform pretty decently, especially in the early game. And then there is another mercenary unit I wanted to take a look at, and that is the Takala Axemen. And this is just a very good assault infantry, shock infantry unit. So they have this two-handed axe halberd thing, and it has an attack of 8, which is awesome. Charge bonus of 5 is great. Again, these are basically charge infantry. Bonus fighting cavalry because of these polearm, well, not polearms, but the two-handed axes. Effective against armor. These guys will eat cavalry for breakfast. Excellent morale and good stamina. So even though they are mercenaries, they are professional soldiers, and they're very willing to fight. Total defense of 16 is... It's low. Usually assault infantry has a lower defense because they're using both hands to hold a weapon instead of a shield, so that is reflected with a 0 shield. But 10 armor is good, and defense skill of 6 is pretty good too. So these guys are fantastic. You can get them throughout Anatolian regions as mercenaries. I believe only as Muslim factions. But if you need some assault infantry, there are worse choices. So these guys are pretty good. The only thing I would watch out for them is they are expensive. Their upkeep is 500, I believe, so that's not bad at all. Or I'm sorry, their recruitment cost is 500, but their upkeep is also 500. So that is pretty pricey. They are worth the money if you have some money, but if you're struggling with your economy, that 500 upkeep will hurt. But other than that, that's pretty much all the infantry I wanted to showcase. There are 2 more units I want to include, but I obviously didn't have the room here in the roster. But yeah, let's look at the cavalry options now. Okay, so we are back, and you can see we still have quite a few units to get through. You have a lot of units, and good units at that, available to you as Karaman. You have a legacy of military conquest, so that kind of makes sense. But let's get into this. I wanted to include 2 more mercenary units as Karaman. You can recruit these guys as any faction, but because Karaman is situated right next to Cyprus, which had a significant Armenian population, as well as their eastern neighbor is Cilicia, the Armenian kingdom of Cilicia, so they had a history with the Armenians, usually not the best of relations, but they did employ some Armenian warriors at times. So there are 2 Armenian units, and we'll go over them now. You can typically recruit these guys in eastern Anatolia, the island of Cyprus, or up on the Crimean Peninsula. So playing as the Crimean Khanate or the Genoese, you might run into them as well. But they're both decent mercenary units. We first have Armenian spearmen, and they're a very average spear unit, but there are worse spearmen. Attack of 3, charge bonus of 3, that's all pretty standard. Total defense of 14 is pretty standard. They're not the most expensive for mercenary units. Cost 270 to recruit them, and their upkeep is also 270. So that's a little pricey for the stats you get as spearmen, but it's not the worst. And if you need some spears, they're not a terrible option for that. They are pretty average, though, I would agree with that. And a much better unit, I mean, not if you want spears, but just overall a better unit would be the Armenian archers. These guys are more professional soldiers. They have long-range missiles, which is great. Good morale and good stamina. Quality superior, that is definitely true. Melee attack of 3 is okay. I think that's armor piercing. I want to say they have maces, but I'd have to double check that. Missile attack of 5 is good. Total defense of 14 is pretty high. I do like that. They are a little pricier. Their upkeep is 300. Their recruitment is also 300, it looks like. So pretty cheap to recruit, but they are a little pricey for the upkeep. Not terrible. And if you need a new archer unit, they're not a bad choice at all. But yeah, just wanted to shout them out real quick. I want to try and get through all the mercenaries, but there are so many different types of mercenaries and area of recruitment troops that I'm just going to try and wedge them into other factions whenever I can. I guess I've kind of been doing that, but I want to continue that. Speaking of, we have another mercenary unit. So this is a mercenary unit available to any faction in Anatolia, I believe, and that is the Muslim cavalry. And this, not a great unit. I'm just gonna say they do have a place, and that place is they're fast, they're very quick, and they're great for chasing down enemy routing units or archers and things like that. But their total defense of 6 does leave a lot to be desired. Their armor, or lack thereof, does give them that speed bonus, which is nice, but any type of missile fire is going to hurt them. They are technically militia, so their morale is not the best, but an attack of 7 and a charge of 6 is not the worst. So they are a nice unit if you have them like away from the main battlefield, just sort of chasing routing units, and then surprise the enemy by flanking with these guys. They will do some damage because of that high attack, so that is nice. And as far as their pricing goes, 320 to recruit, 168 for upkeep. So they're a very cheap unit. You don't have to feel too bad about using them. Just keep in mind that if you go against any type of cavalry, medium or heavy cavalry, you will lose that conflict. And they do take missile fire pretty easily too. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, I take it back. I talked myself out of it. They're not a terrible unit. They have their place, but just know their limits. Next up, we have the Hashem Retainers, and I'm a big fan of these guys. They are a light cavalry, melee cavalry option that sort of fulfills the medium role as well. So they have good morale and powerful charge, which is very nice. Attack of 2, that's just their spear. Charge of 11. Charges are always powerful with cavalry, so even though that is a little on the lower end, it will still deal a lot of damage. And a total defense of 7 is actually not great. They will take hits from anything. You can see that they're not wearing too much armor. They do have a shield and a little bit of training, but nothing spectacular, so they will die pretty quickly if you're not too careful. But the reason why I like them is they're very easy to recruit. You can recruit them and retrain them very easily, and they are very cheap. So recruitment cost of 450 is nothing for a light cavalry unit, and their upkeep is 225, which is not bad at all. And they might even have free upkeep. I can't remember if they do. Either way, that's not a bad price for the charge bonus of 11. So don't get me wrong, they will not do well against any type of spear infantry, polearm infantry, or medium or heavy cavalry. They will take hits from missile fire, but for the price and for their availability, a charge bonus of 11 is not bad at all, especially if you're running into swordsmen or other infantry groups that don't have spears. For their secondary, they have a sword, I believe, with an attack of 7, so that's actually pretty high for light cavalry, so that's nice. They won't do great in the melee just because of their defense, but they will get some kills with an attack of 7. So not a bad unit, just, again, know their limitations. And I would say that's probably the biggest weakness for Karaman, is their melee cavalry starts to fall off pretty quickly the longer the campaign goes. You are one of the best missile cavalry factions in the game, but melee cavalry does leave some to be desired if you're not careful. You do have some options, which we'll see more of, but just be mindful of that. You also have access to a javelin mounted unit, which is great. I love these guys. Good morale, good stamina, love to see that. Melee attack of 6 and a charge bonus of 6 is also nice, so they're another good surprise unit where the enemy might think they're a missile unit, but then you charge them in to deal a little havoc. And again, as always, javelins are devastating, so 11 is fantastic. They've got a few of them, and a defense of 7 is not great. They will take hits, but because of that 11, they are well worth the money, especially in the early game. So recruitment cost of 540 is not bad. Their upkeep, I didn't write it down, but it's not bad either. So don't feel bad about getting these guys. Just know their limits. Any type of melee, and they will melt away. They will take missile fire pretty poorly, but that javelin will win some awards. I don't know what that means, unless you're handing out awards, but it will do a little bit well. Next up, we have Arab cavalry. This is similar to the Arab swordsmen we took a look at, where they're just a very average unit for the type that they are, and they're not bad in a pinch, but you just have to watch out for their upkeep. So good morale, powerful charge. That's pretty standard for medium cavalry. Charge bonus of 11, standard. 14, standard. I would say 14's a little lower than average, but the armor is a little higher, so it kind of balances out. And again, they're just not a bad cavalry unit to pick up in a pinch. Their recruitment cost is 370, which is very cheap, but their upkeep is the same at 370. And 370 upkeep for a average medium cavalry is a little pricey. So that does hurt, and they are also area of recruitment, so you can only get them in Anatolia. But again, in a pinch, not a bad unit at all. Just know that you'll have to watch your economy a little bit, and there usually are better units that outclass these guys pretty quickly on. And for their secondary, they have a sword with an attack of 6. So again, very standard. Moving on, I would get these guys... oh, we got a Silver Surfer there. I would get these guys over the Arab cavalry anytime, and that is the Turkmen Lancers. This is a fantastic unit. Excellent morale, powerful charge, good stamina. Love to see all of that. It says they are superior. I would agree with that. Charge bonus of 11 is great. Total defense of 17 is great. Again, I would still say these guys are more medium cavalry, but that's not a bad thing. They're great medium cavalry. And I also like the added detail here in their design of the bows, or I'm sorry, not the archers. Man, I'm all over the place. The arrows, the quiver of arrows they have here riding on the back of their saddle. That's just a great touch to show that the Turkmen were able to fight both with spear, sword, and bow, which is a great detail. And yeah, great unit. They get free upkeep, I believe, which is fantastic. And even without that, they're not bad at all with their pricing. Their price is, I wrote it in the wrong place, so bear with me. 750 to recruit, 246 for upkeep, which is not bad at all, especially since there are 82 of them in a unit. Usually medium cavalry is in the 60s, so 82 is great. And for their secondary, they have a sword with an attack of 7, so that's also a little higher than average, I would say. The only downside to these men is, unfortunately, their area of recruitment. You can only recruit them in Anatolia, and that actually really hurts you as a faction because you don't have the best melee cavalry. Actually, I take that back. You have really good melee cavalry. It's just it's very hard to get a hold of them. So that hurts you, and you'll also be surrounded by other nations who are very cavalry-heavy nations. You have the Ottomans next to you. You have the Crimean Khanates to the north across the Black Sea. So, especially with the Ottomans, any cavalry you get, you're going to need as many as you can. And outside of Anatolia, you're going to be struggling because you will no longer be able to recruit these guys. Again, you can't always just ship them over from Anatolia, but it does hurt you because they're a fantastic medium cavalry unit that you kind of lose access to later on in the campaign. Still, though, they are fantastic. Definitely pick these guys up whenever you can. They will not disappoint. Obviously, they'll be outclassed later on by heavier cavalry, but still always a good option. Then we have... Hello, kitty. We have another mercenary unit, and I love how these guys look. I love how these guys perform, but I almost never recruit them. So, unfortunately, this is the Mamluk Cavalry. These are Egyptian soldiers who are fighting as mercenaries, and the Karamanids actually have a pretty cool history with the various Egyptian powers, the Mamluks, the Mamluk Sultanate, because, actually, was it the Mamluk Sultanate at that point? Maybe it wasn't. I can't remember my timeline of Egypt, unfortunately, and I should, because that's pretty important, but at the moment I can't. Anyway, they have a pretty interesting history, the two of them. Karaman was often under the influence of the Egyptians who were over in Syria and had a pretty strong strength position there. So pretty cool that these guys are reflected in the mod, and they're an elite cavalry unit, and you can tell that right away. They've got this great armor, even their horses are kind of kitted up, which is great, and yeah, they're fantastic heavy cavalry. Excellent morale, powerful charge bonus of 11 is good, total offense of 23 is very good. Their secondary is 11, so that's on par with a lot of European nobles. That's a sword with an attack of 11 is great. So, why do I not recruit these guys? Well, for two reasons. First of all, they are area of recruitment unit mercenaries, so you can only really recruit them in the southeasternmost parts of Anatolia, which does make that pretty limited. But they are also one of the most expensive mercenary units in the game, and their price is, I wrote it somewhere, their recruitment cost is 800, which is okay for heavy cavalry, but their upkeep is 800 as well, which is just crazy. I would rather have 3 units of Turkmen Lancers than 1 unit of Mamluk cavalry, and that's unfortunate because they look great. I love that you have an Egyptian unit available in the mod, but unfortunately, economically, they're just not worth it unless you really are desperate for some heavy cavalry, which you might be. That is part of Karaman's weakness, I would say. Either way, they look great. So whether you recruit them or not, they look fantastic. Then we have one more melee cavalry unit to go over, and that is another unique unit for you. So you are the only faction that can recruit these guys, but you can only recruit them in certain cities. So similar to the elite cool infantry we talked about, these guys are only available in Karaman, Sinope, or Bursa, as well as Athens and possibly other settlements I would have to test with. But they're a fantastic heavy cavalry unit, and probably the best, actually definitely the best melee cavalry unit available to you. So wow, these sentences are all over the place. I always make these videos at the end of the day after long work days because it's like the only time I have to make them, unfortunately, but that means that my thought process is scattered at best, so thank you for bearing with me. Anyway, yeah, they're a fantastic unit. They're just a little hard to get a hold of because they only come from certain areas. They take 5 turns to recruit. No, I'm sorry, 6 turns to recruit. That's crazy. And you can't train them right away either. So it will take a while for you to get even just a few of these units, but definitely get them whenever you can. Inspires nearby troops, excellent morale, powerful charge bonus of 11, total defense of 25, all of that's fantastic, especially 17 armor. And you can see it, these guys are all armored up, they are ready. They've got it doesn't look like mail, but they've got some coats on their horses, which is cool, extra armor there. And as their secondary, if it couldn't get any better, they have a mace with an attack of 7. So that is armor piercing. 7 is very high for mace attacks, and they will just shred anything in the melee once after they have charged into the enemy. So fantastic unit. They also get 82 men in a unit, so you can stretch them out and cover a lot of terrain, kill a lot of different units in their charge. Love to see that. And these guys perform really well. I've used them a few different times. In my most recent campaign, I'll show you, they were definitely some of my killing machines. And their upkeep is not that bad either. Their recruitment cost is over 2,000. It's 2,155, so that is a lot of money, but their upkeep is only 428, which, I mean, that also is a lot of money, but for 82 of your elite cavalry, it's kind of worth it. Actually, it's definitely worth it because you don't have too many melee cavalry units available to you. So actually, just to show that, if we go over the melee cavalry you have, these guys are restricted to Anatolia. You have your Hashem retainers everywhere, so you can train these guys anywhere else. Arab cavalry only available in Anatolia as mercenaries. Turkmen lancers, I love them. They're fantastic, but they're only available in Anatolia. Mamluks, great cavalry, but very expensive and only available in limited parts of Anatolia. And then you have the Senior Cool Lancers, but they're only available in certain settlements. So outside of Anatolia, the only cavalry you're going to have that aren't mercenaries are your Hashem retainers. So that really does hurt, and that is probably Karaman's biggest weakness. Now, you can overcome it with mercenaries and then bringing in reinforcements, obviously, but that is something to watch out for. However, one of your biggest strengths is your horse archers. You have some fantastic horse archers. I would say you're probably in the top 3 factions of best horse archer factions. I would say the Crimean Khanate and the Ottomans are really the only ones who are on a similar level. And let's start off. First of all, you are one of the few factions who has a horse archer unit as the general. I think the Crimean Khanate's the only other faction that has this, but I'd have to double check that, but either way, they're a great unit. It's pretty neat to have a horse archer unit as your general. It kind of sets them apart. So inspires nearby troops. That's pretty typical, but that's awesome. Long range missiles is great, especially since it's attack of 6, so they will get some kills. Unfortunately, there's only 22 of them in a unit, or a few more if your general's more influential. But yeah, that hurts a little bit because I'd rather just have 150 archers on foot. But still, they will get some kills with that 6. And their melee attack is a 5 with a charge of 3. That's a little low, but it is armor piercing because they have these maces on them. And then their best strength quality is their defense. 30 is very respectable, especially since 20 of that is armor. These guys are hard to kill, so that is the best thing they got going for them. There are, I would say, a lot of other general units are better than these guys just because melee cavalry is so powerful. But these guys definitely are still foes to be contended with. They're just, that armor really carries them through. So that does help. Just be careful in the melee because if they get overwhelmed, which they can be pretty easily, they will eventually take hits. But I just like that they're a bow unit because it sets Karaman apart from just the time and time again repeated melee cavalry general unit, which isn't bad by any means, but it helps give the faction a little more flavor. So great unit there. Then we have the Turkmen Tribal Horsemen. This is also a mercenary unit that you can pick up throughout Anatolia. And they're basically light cavalry archers. Can form shooting circle, which is nice. Good stamina, that's also nice. Melee attack of 5 and charge bonus of 5. That's actually a little higher than I would expect. So that's good if you want those surprise charges. Missile attack of 4 is pretty standard, and total defense of 4 really hurts them. They will take archer fire very easily. What I would recommend is if you do pick these guys up, use that, what do they call it? Shooting circle, or the Cantabrian circle, where your men ride in a circle shooting their bows. I usually don't use it with more armored horse archers because they tire quickly, but for these guys, their mobility is really their best defense, because a 2 defense skill is that doesn't really matter with archer fire, and then a shield of 2 that also really hurts. So they will take archer fire very easily if you're not careful with them. But they're cheap. You can get them fairly easily. I think any faction, regardless of religion, can train these guys in Anatolia, so that's nice. And there are 80 of them in a unit, so 80 men firing a missile attack of 4, that's always good, so they're not a bad unit by any means. Just watch out for that low defense. But then you have 4 more heavily armored horse archers, and I'm a big fan of all 4 of these units. We have the Nokia Retainers. I've talked about these guys before. They're great. Can form that shooting circle, long-range missiles, which is pretty rare for a lot of horse archers, so that's really nice to see. Good morale and good stamina. Missile attack of 5 is great. Melee attack of 6 is great. Charge bonus of 6 is great. That's all just great, to be redundant there. And total offense of 14 is also pretty great. I should stop saying that word, but that's what it is. These guys are great. You can only recruit them in Anatolian regions. A few European regions can also train them, I believe, but I haven't played around with these guys as much as I would like to, just because as Karaman you have better horse archer units, I would say. But these guys always perform well, definitely. So don't feel bad about getting these guys up. And the long-range missiles is really nice, especially for horse archers. And on top of that, they look fantastic. I love their design. So definitely a good job to the modders on these guys. I can't really think of any unit that looks bad, actually. The modders have just gone above and beyond in so many ways. Next up, we have the Turkmen Medium Cavalry, who, like the Turkmen Lancers, are just a very good unit. So they can form that shooting circle, good morale, good stamina, missile attack of 5, melee attack of 6, charge bonus of 6, total defense of 14. Say it with me, that's all great. So these guys are a great unit, and I picked them up pretty easily. They pair really well with the Turkmen Lancers. Both of them are just very good cavalry units. You use your missile units to draw the enemy away from their army, and then you charge the Lancers in to finish them off. That's a great combo right there. Total defense of 14, I already said that's great, but yeah, these guys are great. Their pricing, oh man, I think I've forgotten a few prices with these guys, but whoops, we'll just keep going. Turkmen Medium Cavalry, their cost is 650 to recruit and 237 upkeep, which is not bad at all. So again, like their Lancers, great unit, but only available in Anatolia, unfortunately. So it doesn't hurt you as much with horse archers because you have a lot of great other options, but do watch out for that. And then the other thing I would say with these guys is you can see that horse archers have different formations. Sometimes they're just this scatterbrained, I don't know what I would call this, but it's just a blob of men, whereas otherwise they have these rectangular shapes. And basically they're pros and cons to both. Wow, I'm just a hot mess here, aren't I? Well, let's just keep going. Let's finish this episode. Yes, if they're scattered in this way, they won't take as much missile fire, but their charges will be less impactful. So kind of depends which one you want. For me, I like to have these formations because I do like using my horse archers to charge in when the enemy is not expecting it, but it kind of just depends on your playstyle. And then we have 2 more units. We have the Askari Horse Archers, and I think I talked about these guys when I covered the Jandruids, but they're a fantastic unit. Long-range missiles, excellent morale. They can form that shooting circle. They are your feudal unit, or one of them, so they are a little more expensive, but they get that free upkeep. and they're also relatively easy to train across your empire once you have your feudal buildings and your culture leveled up enough. But yeah, just a very solid missile unit. Total offense of 15 is great. Missile attack of 5 is good. Melee attack of 7 is also a little higher than you would expect, so I love to see that. I definitely do train these guys as Karaman, but there is a better unit for you, and that is the Junior Cool Horse Archers. Wow, man, I can barely speak at all. Yeah, these guys are fantastic. They're, I would say, one of the better horse archers in the game. There are better horse archers, but these guys are up there. There are 82 of them in a unit, which is great. Missile attack of 5 is good. It is long-range missiles. Good morale, good stamina. Total defense of 15 is great. So all of that is very nice. The melee attack of 2 is pretty low, but it is armor piercing, so they will be able to get a few kills with that. And I typically pick these guys up more than the Ascaris just because there are more of them in a unit, but they're both actually really good units, and they pair well together. These guys are good in the melee, they're better, but there are more men in this unit if you want more arrows in the air. Either way, you have a host of horse archers to choose from, which is very nice. You'll definitely have a lot of those guys in your armies as Karaman. And you do have good melee cavalry as well. Just watch out for anything outside of Anatolia. So this was a hot mess of a roster part of the episode. I'm saying episode like I'm podcasting. Of the videos. There we go. All right, well, I'm going to go probably sleep for 35 hours, and then we'll take a look at my most recent campaign as the Emirate of Karaman. Alright, I lied. I did not go to sleep for 30 hours. Let's just get right into this and finish it, and bear with me as I inevitably stumble through every sentence I am saying. So, here we are with my most recent campaign. It is turn 121, year 1478. I control 47 of the 50 regions I need to win the game, but I am on the verge of victory. However, a few things I want to look at first. Let's first look at the Ahi Brotherhood Guild that I mentioned before. So you can build these throughout Anatolia as Muslim factions, and they give the population growth bonus, which is great. Anything that can help grow your cities is very powerful. Increase in tradable goods is nice, and there is a minus 5% bonus to law. So that can hurt a little bit with corruption. But it's definitely worth it, and like I said, it gives you access to the Brotherhood Warriors, which, with that upkeep of 123, it is so worth it. And then also, here in Konya, if you build your upgraded mercenary barracks, this is where you can actually train and retrain the Mamluk cavalry, as well as some Kipchak archers, Tatar lancers, a few other units I didn't go over. But these guys I covered in my Crimean Khanate video, so if you want to see that, go over to that video, which is pretty neat there. And then there is also a unit I wanted to talk about. Let's see if I can find one of them. No, can I train any? I can. So there's also another mercenary unit I wanted to talk about, and that is the Martolos Axemen, and this is another mercenary unit that's I'm a big fan of. I use these guys a lot as Muslim factions. So it's a basic axe unit, and they're not the best by any means, but they're so cheap. 350 recruitment cost. There we go. 129 upkeep, that's all great. Attack of 3, charge bonus of 2, total defense of 10. Again, they're not the best unit, but because of that price and because of their availability, you can train 2 of them right here. You can make whole stacks of these guys fairly easy if you have a few generals recruiting them. It says they're recruitable in only Western Anatolian regions. That's not entirely accurate. You can recruit them through several European settlement or regions as well. There we go. Yeah, another unit, but I just wanted to give them a quick shout out because I do use them. Alright, so let's talk about my campaign. Like I said earlier, the big question as Karaman is, are you going to ally with the Ottomans or are you going to fight them? And for my campaign, I decided I am going to ally with the Ottomans, and I'm going to basically treat them as my big brother in everything, let them do a lot of the heavy lifting of empire forging, and then just eat the scraps of their empire. While in the meantime planning my inevitable backstab. There we go. So my first thing to do was I marched up into the Jandarid territory, and I beat the Ottomans here. They helped me in some of the battles, but I took all of the Jandarid lands, and this gave me a boost to my economy, as well as some great recruitment centers. So you can see here that I can train all of my best units, or a lot of my best units, and that is pretty nice. And that also pretty much doubled my empire, because I came over here and I took Amasra from the Genoese as well. So I went from 4 settlements to 8 settlements in that one move, and that, yeah, that was pretty nice. Oh, you can see here this this Ottoman general I was talking about earlier. There's no way for him to access me. And just ignore my cat in the litter box right next to my computer, because he's kicking it around because he's angry at me for some reason, like he always is. Anyway, after I did this, I sailed down to Cyprus. I took Cyprus, and it's not the most important settlement, it's not the richest, but it does give you some nice recruitment options, and I have some lancers there as well. And after this, I was still at war with the Hospitallers, but my Imam had enough piety that he was able to call a crusade, or not a crusade, a jihad. So I called wow, I keep saying crusade. He called a jihad against the Hospitallers, so I sailed across the Mediterranean. I landed in Rhodes, and I destroyed the Crusaders here. So I was able to now sort of move westward. After this, I stopped my expansion, and I focused on my economy. I disbanded a lot of units, I built up a lot of economic buildings, and my main reason to do this was I was gonna go on a purchasing spree, and I did. I bought all of these lands from the Ottomans. So one by one, definitely took a lot of time. This was a slower campaign than usual, but I bought all of these cities one by one. I funded all of the Ottoman wars. We'll take a look, but they expanded pretty deeply into Europe because I was just handing them so much money. And we were actually on pretty great relations. I was able to sort of rebuild that, and in the meantime, build up my empire. So that was great. You can see that so many of these settlements are making a ton of money. Easily over 2,000, sometimes even over 4,000 here, although this is a very rich settlement. And Anatolia is a great part of the map. You can really build, once you build it up, you can really make a lot of money. After this, I sailed across the sea and beat up the Crimean Khanate a little bit. So I took over the Crimean Peninsula, which has given me some more cash. And am I at peace with them? Yeah, I'm neutral with them, but they asked for that because I did destroy some of their armies. They have a lot of soldiers, which is kind of disconcerting, but my Ottoman allies have also made it all the way up here. So if push comes to shove, I'm not too worried about dealing with the Crimean Khanate. I have enough soldiers here that I'd be able to hold them off until I could train more units. And I can train some good units, including the rocket launcher, which is nice. Speaking of, I know I haven't talked about any artillery units. I will cover all the artillery units in a later episode. So don't think I've forgotten about them. I haven't. That's a really, really important part of this mod. And I probably should have talked about them with every faction, but that'd just be a lot of repeats. So I've decided to do a separate video on those. Anyway, after I had basically bought all of Anatolia, I moved my expansion westward. And a lot of the Aegean islands I was going to attack, but the Ottomans beat me there. So they've taken Naxos, they've taken... Did they lose Crete? I think they took Crete, and then they lost Crete, because the Venetians do try to reclaim it. But they've taken these islands up here as well, although I was able to buy Chios from them. And then I expanded westwards. So the Greeks and the Florentines and Epirus had actually all remained alive against the Ottoman onslaughts. So I finished the job for them, and I destroyed the Roman Empire. I kicked the Italians out of here. I destroyed Epirus, and now I have a nice little foothold in Greece. It's not the richest area because it's far from my capital, but it doesn't really need to be because I'm making money in Anatolia. You can see here that in Athens, I can also train those unique units, which is kind of nice, as well as a princess, which is sometimes helpful. And then moving up here, I do have lines in the sand. Nothing too spectacular, but just in case the Ottomans do backstab me, I would be able to fight them off a little bit. At least, actually, I'm looking at this, and these are pretty terrible troops, but at least I have a lot of them, and I'm not too concerned about this. Anyway, after I took over Greece, I decided to take the war to the Christians on their homelands in Italy. So I sailed over to Sicily. Sicily is often very poorly guarded, and I was able to take it pretty much without a fight. I have Palermo here, and I have Messina. You can see that I have a lot of my veteran troops holding the line against Naples in case they try to retake Sicily. So I've got those spearmen, the swordsmen. Again, like I said earlier, the Fittian Braves, they're technically average militia, but I have no problem throwing them in the fight because they have some great stats here. And I've got some Bombards and Nafatoon to help as well, including some Ghazis with good veterancy. So that's a pretty good army. I need to do some retraining, but not too worried about it. Then I sailed up the islands. I took Sardinia, and I took Corsica, and then I just sailed right over to Rome. So we are nearing the end of the game, and I have some of my best soldiers who have seen fights in all across Anatolia, across Greece and Sicily, and they are finally here at the Holy City, which was actually taken by Florence. So that's kind of interesting. Am I at war with the Papal States? I don't remember. No, I'm not. I'm actually neutral with them. I've been at war with Florence for a while, though, ever since I took Athens. But I love looking at this army because I have fond memories of all of these units. They've all performed very well for me. And we're about to take Rome. In fact, let's just take it real quick. And we've taken Rome. So just like that, Rome is now Islamic, and we are one settlement closer to winning the game. Oh shoot, I think there was one more thing I was gonna show. I can't remember. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm sure there's something I'm forgetting, but overall, this is a fantastic campaign. I was totally wrong. I was not expecting Karaman to be as fun as it was, but I really enjoyed this campaign. I would highly recommend playing as them. They're definitely sort of an underdog. You were once a great nation. I used nation again. You were once a great kingdom or faction, and you can rebuild it to live the glory days. You can see here that a lot of this cavalry gets free upkeep, which is just great. So that is the campaign. Deal with the Ottomans how you will. Just be mindful that both options come with their pros and cons. And speaking of the Ottomans, I finally have betrayed them, and I am going to rebuild the Seljuk Empire, not them. And so I'm on the verge of taking Bursa as well as Constantinople. So these are my three armies. These men lack any veterancy, but I don't think they'll have any issue taking Bursa. And here we go. We'll take Bursa. Took a few hits, but nothing too bad. We'll walk in. Bursa is such a rich city. We're making over 5,000 just off the bat, and I haven't even rebuilt everything. So that's nice. And then, of course, we will take Constantinople itself. These soldiers don't have too much veterancy either, but I think there's only like 20 guys in here. Yep. So that is that. And that would be harder to do with the garrison script. Which I do play with sometimes, but just for these videos, I don't want to spend too much time. I don't have that much time to play on the hardest difficulties, but hopefully that kind of gives you an idea. Okay, this is so loud. I'm going to continue playing, though, because I wanted to take a look at the campaign map real quick before I end this video, but definitely give Karaman a try. They're a great faction. But you can see here that the Ottomans have pushed really far into Europe. They are well into Bosnia. They've destroyed Serbia. They've almost destroyed Wallachia. It looks like Wallachia has one or two turns left. And they're even up here into, in the Carpathian Mountains. They've come up here into Moldova. They're laying siege to, oh, the Wallachians are up here. What? Wait, what's going on? I don't remember this campaign very well. Looks like the Wallachians expanded. And then the Ottomans basically came up behind them. The Poles aren't doing too well. Looks like we have the Golden Horde expanding in here. Kiev is not doing well. Oh, the Crimean Khanate to Kiev. That's cool. And Moldova isn't doing well. Then over here, yeah, everyone's kind of suffering. Milan is doing well. Florence is doing well, but they've also lost a lot. Austrians are holding on. Venice is suffering. Actually, does Venice only have one settlement? No, they have 1, 2, 3. Wow, that's rare to see Venice with that low. The Swiss are always doing well. They do well in every campaign because they're very overpowered, but we'll talk about that later. I do love the Swiss. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Other than that, sort of a standard campaign. Wow, looks like Poland and Hungary went to war too. That's interesting. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Give Karaman a try, and other than that, hopefully I'll have another video out soon. I do have a campaign that is finished that I'm ready to cover, as well as 2 more that are almost done. And yeah, as far as my podcast goes, I do have a podcast on Amir Timur, or Tamerlane, the infamous 14th century Turco-Mongol warlord from Central Asia. And it's been a little while since I've made an episode, but I'm hoping to get back into that soon. So check that out in the description below if you're interested. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.